Good evening. Welcome to the Santa Barbara County One Climate Initiative workshop for the Climate Change Vulnerability Assessment. Thank you for joining us this evening. We're really excited to spend the next hour and a half with you. We are going to go ahead and get started. So let's advance our screen. And I want to take a moment to point out a couple of features of our Zoom workshop this evening. You do have the option, if you would like to use closed captioning throughout this workshop. At the bottom of your screen on your Zoom toolbar, you should see a note that says live transcript with a CC above it. If you click on that, you'll have the option to hide or show subtitles. So if you show subtitles, you'll be able to follow along with us as well as see this transcript to the right of your screen if you'd like. You also have the option to change your name and to show or not show your video. So we will have an opportunity later in the workshop to go into breakout rooms, and we do encourage you at that time to show up in person to the best you can and turn on your video. We understand if some of you may not be able to do that right now. We do ask that everyone stay muted throughout the workshop. That'll just cut down on the background noise. But again, when you're in the small breakout rooms, we absolutely encourage you to come off mute. Tonight, we are going to be encouraging you to use the chat feature to share your comments and questions with us. So if you are not familiar with chat, again, this is looking at the toolbar at the bottom of your screen, you'll see a chat with a little comment bubble. And click on that and you'll be able to send a message to the meeting host. And I do encourage you to send those questions to me. I'm named as Project Questions, Ask Me Tammy, and I'm Tammy Seal, a consultant to the county. So I think those are our basic logistics we wanted to make sure to go over with all of you tonight. We're really excited to jump right into it. And we also do have this meeting available in Spanish. So if you would like to hear it in Spanish, you can hit the interpretation button and switch to the Spanish channel as well. And we will have a breakout room for Spanish speakers, and we do encourage you to send us questions in Spanish or English into the chat. Okay, so I think we're going to jump right into it. It's my pleasure right now to welcome Supervisor Doss Williams to share a few remarks with us.
Good evening. It's an honor to be here with you. I just want to thank our county long-term planning, our planners, and our consultants for initiating this work, and for the public for being here. I will say that when our director asked me, hey, can you kick off the safety element update? I was like, sure. Knowing I know enough about planning to know that the safety element used to be, let's just say, with no offense to our fire marshal, Rob Hazard, not usually the center of attention in a community and in the general plan in general. But now it's going to be exciting, because a climate change vulnerability assessment adds to the other very important parts of a safety element to bring us right on the cutting edge of public policy and planning. So what used to be humdrum is no longer. And judging from some of the folks here tonight, I can tell you're going to be very engaged in how we as a community can help prepare. I would say that 3 out of the 4 years that I've been a supervisor have been dealing with basically disasters, and we are going to have more, and it's good for us to plan in a way that recognizes our vulnerabilities. With that, I just want to say, I hope soon we will be able to be doing this once again with little treats and with a chance to interact with each other as human beings again. I do think that makes for better planning and better public policy. But I appreciate your engagement in the Zoom format until we can do so. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Williams. All right, so we want to jump right into our the details tonight. So just to give you a sense of how we're going to spend our time, we have a very short poll for you coming up next, and then we'll get into a presentation, project overview. We will have a second poll for you that will allow us to get a little bit of information about what your experience has been with some of the natural hazards in Santa Barbara County. Then we have part 2 of our presentation, and then small group discussions. And we are trying to reserve at least 5 to 10 minutes at the end of the workshop for us to come back together and share some of the highlights or key points of our small group conversations. And it is our goal to wrap up by 7:30. Okay, we have a great project team for you tonight. This is a project being led out of the planning department with our project management team of Julie Harris and Whitney Wilkinson. You'll get to meet some of the county planning staff, the One Climate team staff, and members of our consultant team from PlaceWorks throughout the evening. We'll have a few folks sharing the presentation and then also facilitating our small groups. So with that, I think we have a couple questions we want to ask you to answer before we jump right into it. These will help us decide, there's some content that we can share with you. So you have 3 options to take this poll. If you have your smartphone, you can try waving it in front of this QR code and see if that'll take you right to the Menti poll on your screen. You can go to menti.com and enter the link, which the code is 3665181. Or Jacqueline has just shared the link in the chat, and you can copy that and paste it into a browser of your choice. So if you could please jump over to that Mentimeter poll, and we will get to see, we're asking you 3 questions. Have you participated in a County Board of Supervisors public hearing, planning commission hearing, or workshop before tonight? This always helps us to know, just to get a sense of who's in the room with us. And it looks like many of you have been here before. We would love to hear about how you heard about the workshop so that we can get a sense of which techniques we're using are working. So it looks like your social networks have brought you here tonight. Word of mouth seems to be popular. And then our final question is to ask if you would like us to spend a little bit more time with any of the Zoom logistics. So I did go over the highlights that we wanted to draw your attention for with using Zoom. But if anyone needs a little more information about how to use Zoom, please do let us know. Great, so thank you everyone. And that poll will stay open. But we are, so what we've seen is that many of you have been participating in county events, that the sustainability newsletter seems to have been the tool that got to most of you, and that we do have a request to go over some logistics on how to use Zoom. So I think we will go to that now, Eli, if we can pop up those slides. Okay, thanks. So what we wanted to do with this slide is to orient you to the screen. So what's important is to know where your Zoom toolbar is, and it should be at the bottom of your screen. In the bottom, the lower left corner is how you adjust your audio. So you will have the option to mute or unmute yourself. We ask that you stay muted until you're in the breakout room. Next to that, with the video camera, you have the option to turn your video on and off. You also have the option to put in a virtual background if you would like, if you want to hide anything in your background. I do want to share with you all that this meeting is being recorded so that we can put it on the county's website and share it with those folks who are not here with us, able to be with us this evening. So please do keep that in mind when your video is on. You should have the option if you click on the participants button to see who's here with us. The chat we went over, that's how we encourage you to share your questions with us. These are all buttons essentially that you should be able to use your mouse and click on. And you also have the option, as we mentioned, to do the closed captioning. And we encourage you throughout the evening, if you'd like, to share your reactions with us. So the Zoom offers us the reaction of, a thumbs up and a smiley face or things like that. So feel free to use that. And then we have the language channel. In the top right, you are able to adjust your view. So you have the choice of seeing the speaker, or if you hit gallery, you'll be able to see the boxes of everyone who's here. And you also have the option to go to a full screen where it'll pop open and fill your monitor, your computer screen, or if you hit escape, you can size it back down. So Eli, I think went over these. And then if you're joining us from a tablet or smartphone, it should generally be about the same. You're just going to have a smaller view. Your buttons may be split where your video and mute might be at the top of your screen if you're on a tablet, and similarly at the bottom if you're on a smartphone. So if you do have any questions about how to use the Zoom while we're going through the meeting, we do encourage you to send those questions in the chat to Sean, you'll find him, he's the meeting host, and he is labeled as Zoom Questions Ask Me. Thanks, Eli. All right, and now we're gonna get started with our presentation. And first off, we have a short video to share with you all.
Santa Barbara County is just this great place to live and to raise a family.
I'm an 8th generation Santa Barbara. We have family all over the county, from Guadalupe all the way to Carpinteria. You can be on the beach half day and then you can be up in the mountains in 10 minutes.
We have folks from all walks of life who have different histories, different experiences.
People are connected enough that it feels really possible to build a network.
We're a generation that has grown up learning about climate change like we learn about history. We've had the Thomas Fire.
The weird hot weather with hail.
Sea level rise is actually eating away at some of the park facilities.
I think we can look at the pandemic as a signal as to who is going to be at most risk.
A lot of people call this paradise. And I'm like, well, it's not paradise for everybody. There's a lot of poverty here.
The only thing that's up for debate is how do we address it? How intense should that effort be?
One Climate is an initiative that the county is launching to really raise awareness and increase participation in the work that the county is doing to make sure that we're including marginalized voices, people who don't normally participate in civic planning processes.
We have so many people, particularly young folks, who are leading this movement.
What you eat, what you wear, where you buy things from, they all have a huge effect.
We are working to improve the health of our soils, to improve carbon capture. We're looking at tree plantings because we have so much space here.
It's doable if we just prioritize this and say, absolutely, we can do this and we will do this.
Because ultimately, we all want what's best for our children, right? And for our families and for our communities.
We're able to offer free and discounted energy efficiency measures that help homeowners save money. Central Coast Community Energy, which is the organization we've joined, has a plan to provide 100% renewable energy.
We're really looking at ways to improve quality of life and making sure that people have green spaces to enjoy for generations to come.
If we take the high road, we can fight climate change and protect working people at the same time.
All of these issues are intertwined.
So we want to make sure that those voices and those concerns are heard.
Find out about workshops, engage with online tools, sign up for our newsletters, and just get more involved.
One county.
One county.
One future.
One future.
One future.
One climate.
One climate.
One county, one future, and one climate.
Thank you. And I'd like to invite Julie Harris to provide a little bit more information about One Climate.
Sorry, apologize. Thanks, Tammy. My name is Julie Harris, and I am a planner with the County Long Range Planning Division, and I am the interim project manager for the Climate Change Vulnerability Assessment and Safety Element Update. I'm filling in temporarily for Whitney Wilkinson. So we just saw this great video about One Climate, and right now we've got several flagship projects that fall under the One Climate initiative, and these include the Climate Change Vulnerability Assessment and the Safety Element Update, which is the focus of tonight's workshop. And also there is the 2030 Climate Action Plan, which seeks to reduce our carbon emissions by 50%. And the Active Transportation Plan, which will help to make walking and biking safer in the county. Another effort mentioned in the video, and not directly being led by the county, is customer enrollment in the Central Coast Energy. Next slide, please. Each of these projects has its own timeline, but we hope to simplify and unify our messaging, outreach, and engagement activities through One Climate. Next slide. Before moving on, I do want to announce that the next One Climate workshop will be held on March 25th at noon and again at 6 p.m. And that will be to kick off the 2030 Climate Action Plan. So I hope that you'll reserve that time on your calendars. Next slide. So this evening, I'm going to provide a brief refresher regarding the Climate Change Vulnerability Assessment and Adaptation Plan. And show some of the work that we've done so far and request your input this evening regarding hazards and adaptive capacity. So why are we doing a climate change vulnerability assessment? In part, we have to do it because the state's requiring it. The regulations require us to update policies in our safety element to incorporate climate vulnerabilities and adaptation strategies that address those vulnerabilities. But also, it's really important for us to understand how a changing climate may harm our community, who and what are most vulnerable to the effects of climate change, and how do we prioritize our adaptation strategies. Next slide. This diagram shows the 4 phases of vulnerability assessment and adaptation planning process. We began the assessment last summer, and we intend to finish that assessment this summer. Using the vulnerabilities we identify in the first 2 phases of this project, we'll begin developing the adaptation strategies to address them later this year. Throughout this process, we'll continue reaching out for your input. We're now going to take a closer look at the steps involved in the first 2 phases. Broadly, we're asking, what are the effects of climate change that we will see? Who are the people and what are the community assets that will be most at risk? What are the potential impacts to these resources, and is there any existing ability to adapt? We've been working on this 3rd step since the December workshop, and we'll focus more on this topic in a few minutes. And finally, we assess these vulnerabilities to determine those with the most immediate needs to address first. Next slide. So in step 1, we identified the climate change projections and the hazards that we're likely to see. More details regarding these hazards are provided on tonight's handout. Next slide. In step 2, we identified who and what are most at risk to climate hazards. At-risk community assets include buildings and infrastructure, key community services, economic drivers, and ecosystems and natural resources. Next slide. Who is most at risk are the groups of people that we refer to as frontline communities, defined as people who are most likely to experience the impacts of climate change sooner and more severely than others because they may lack the resources or there may be specific conditions that prevent them from easily adapting to climate change effects. Next slide. At this time, I'd like to hand off the presentation to Jacqueline Prutzman of PlaceWorks, who will provide more information on step 3.
Thanks, Julie. So I will go over the last 2 steps of the vulnerability assessment process. Step 3 is to assess potential impacts and adaptive capacity. So how will the hazards we identified affect populations and assets? And what is the current capacity of those populations and assets to prepare for, respond to, and recover from these effects? So we'll be assessing these on a scale from low to high. So low impacts would be there are little to no change or minor but noticeable effects. On the opposite end, a high impact would be a severe risk of widespread loss of life, services, or economic sectors, or impacts may be permanent. The other factor is adaptive capacity. And this is also assessed on a scale, but opposite. So a low adaptive capacity score would mean no means of adapting, or adaptive solutions are expensive or difficult. On the other hand, a high adaptive capacity would mean there may be little or no effort needed to adapt, and solutions are feasible for most or all populations and assets. Next slide. So both of these factor into vulnerability, and the vulnerabilities of all of the populations and assets to all of the hazards will then be prioritized to identify the major climate vulnerabilities in the county. So to go along with the assessment, we have 2 online mapping tools, and they're both on the project website. The first one on the left-hand side of the screen is a engagement map. So we encourage you to visit this social pinpoint website and add in comments about the hazards that you've experienced or some of the effects to different assets or populations that you've seen or experienced firsthand around the county. On your right is a screenshot of the project map, which is also available on the project website. And this map shows a aggregate of all of the frontline community demographic data. And you can also overlay different hazards as well. So some of the hazards include sea level rise projections, wildfire projections, flooding, and extreme heat throughout the county. And we've copied a link and posted that in the chat as well. So now I'll move on to some of the engagement and outreach that we've been doing so far. The graphic on the screen is from the December 9th workshop, when we asked you all, what does resilience in Santa Barbara County mean to you? And these are some of the answers that you responded with. Next slide. So 2020 was a busy year for outreach and engagement for this project. The project team launched the project website and online activities. We also held a community workshop on December 9th. Our team attended a couple of meetings with the Equity Advisory and Outreach Committee. We received feedback on frontline populations and communities, and also some of the impacts and adaptive capacity that those populations have as well. We also held 9 meetings with the core team, which is made up of county and agency staff. Through from December 10th through December 18th, we held a series of adaptive capacity meetings to learn about some of the programs, funding mechanisms, and tools that the county departments have to help assets and community members address some of the hazards in the county. So here's a summary of what we've heard so far. As far as impacts, the effects of COVID-19, wildfires, and heat waves disproportionately impact frontline communities. And the frontline communities experience these effects differently. So for example, seniors may experience different impacts than households in poverty or persons experiencing homelessness. We also heard that heat, drought, and smoke have devastating effects on the agricultural sector, including the workers in that sector, as well as some of the natural habitats in the county. The next impact related to the Thomas Fire. So the Thomas Fire and debris flows caused major connectivity issues along 101 and the railway system affecting transportation corridors throughout the county. And lastly, the communities living along streams, rivers, and coastal systems have been affected by inland and coastal flooding. We've also heard a lot about the ability of assets, populations to adapt, prepare for, respond, and recover from some of the impacts. The first is that home weatherization assistance programs are available throughout the county by both public and private agencies. There are a few evacuation assistance programs available through Easy Lift, Smooth, and Senior Ride programs that have been effective in previous hazardous events. The county is developing a regional wildfire mitigation program, and that has funding. CAUSE and the county's Ag Commissioner's Office have provided personal protective equipment, including masks, to outdoor workers during both COVID-19 and smoke events. With the positives, we also learned of some of the barriers in adaptive capacity as well. So the first being that there is no formal warming center or cooling plan in the county that allows these cooling centers to open when temperature increases to a certain temperature. We've also learned that there are some language barriers that may prevent emergency notifications from reaching all members of the communities as well. So with that, I will turn it over to Tammy for any questions about the project.
Thank you, Jacqueline and Julie. If you have any questions for our project team at this point, please drop those into the chat for us. And it's okay if you don't have any now. You can certainly drop those into the chat at any time they occur to you throughout the evening. We do have another Mentimeter poll for you that I'd like to go to now. And if you do have a question, definitely feel free to drop that in the chat and we'll work on accommodating that. So this is similar to the first one. You can go to menti.com, enter the code 7704080. This is a different code. And you can also use the link that Jacqueline just dropped into the chat, copy and paste that into your browser or scan the QR code with your smartphone. So we do hope that all or most of you will be able to take the Mentimeter poll. If you cannot, it's okay. Jacqueline is going to share her screen now so that you'll be able to see the questions and the results. And we will also encourage you to send any responses that you might have into the chat to me or to everyone if you aren't able to use the Mentimeter poll. And so these questions that we're asking you are really about to share with us what it's been like to have experienced some of these events in the county. So our first question asks, what effects have you or your community experienced from coastal hazards or flooding? To see the Spanish translation, please hover and click on that text and it will drop down the Spanish interpretation for that question. So I know there are a lot of options to choose from, but we also know that these natural hazards, these disasters affect us all in very different ways. So we are curious to know if you feel that the beaches seem to be getting smaller, if you're noticing changes to marine life or ecosystems, if you're experiencing now or have experienced water damage to your home, to your business, to a business or recreation facility that you frequent and love. If you're experiencing a change in if you're a homeowner to your property insurance or a business owner, a loss of that or an increase. If you perceive the bluffs to be eroding faster than you might expect, or if you have very much unfortunately experienced the death of a loved one due to a coastal hazard or flooding. And so we do, I have set this up so that you should be able to progress through the slides as you need to. So you are free to, after you've clicked through the options, to go to the next slide. So the next question is, what effects have you or your community experienced from wildfires and debris flows? So we're seeing definitely how this hazard has seemed to affect more participants tonight. So, have you, has a wildfire debris flow prevented you from going to work or school? Have you had trouble breathing due to poor air quality? Have you been prohibited from going outside to exercise? Have you experienced ash or smoke, fire, or debris damage to your home? Cost to rebuild or repair, damage to nature near you, traffic due in your neighborhood because suddenly, you know, road closures have brought more traffic to your neighborhood or to roads that you normally use, disruption to your sleep, work schedules, or other personal activities, changes again here to your property insurance because of wildfire or other events. Have you lost power? Have you lost a loved one? Have you had changes to your physical and or mental health as a result of wildfires and debris flows? We really appreciate you sharing with us. I know that for some of us that it can be sensitive to revisit some of these hazards. And so we do appreciate the time that you've spent reading through the questions and sharing with us tonight. Our next question is about extreme heat, which is perhaps a newer hazard to us. And so we've asked, what effects have you or your community experienced from extreme heat? Again, for the Spanish version of this, please hover over the question, click it, and you'll be able to see the Spanish interpretation. Have you experienced increased utility bills, sickness or doctor visits, the need to buy or install appliances to stay cool? Have you lost power to your home or business? Have you been unable to get fruits or vegetables you might normally get due to a shortage? Have you had to delay or cancel an event? Have you lost a loved one from extreme heat? Has it affected your physical or mental health? And finally, have you had a disruption to your schedule, to your sleep, work, or other activities as a result of extreme heat? And I think we've hit on this, but extreme heat would be, you know, days exceptionally hotter than normal, above average, extended period heat waves, extended period of higher than average temperatures. Okay, and then if you've advanced to the next one, it asked, what effects have you or your community experienced from drought? And so increased utility bills, sickness and or doctor visits, loss of power, inability to get a fruit or vegetable, loss or reduced use of water, changes to your physical or mental health. And we've been asked to identify your community, and this is meant that if you haven't as an individually experienced some of these, but if you have seen them either happen in your neighborhood or in the community around you, whether it's the city or you can think of the county as your community. We're kind of leaving that up to you. We're trying to get at what things have affected you personally or that you think are important to share that you've observed them happening to those around you. Yeah, and we will go back through these to share the results. I think we have two more questions for folks to answer, and then we'll start at the beginning to share the results. What effects have you or your community experienced from human health hazards? And so similar, death of a loved one, loss of income, change in housing, increased medical costs, changes to day-to-day routine, changes to physical or mental health, delayed or canceled an event. And then finally, this is an opportunity just to share, you know, what hazard, event, disaster has been especially memorable and why. You can just note the disaster. You should be able to enter as many notes as you would like, and we'll capture all of them. We may not be able to see them all on the screen, but they will all come to us. So I think we would all expect that the Thomas Fire, the Montecito debris flows are certainly still very present as affecting all of us, as well as some of the other fires. And of course, what we're still experiencing with our COVID-19. So Jacqueline, if we could, before we jump back to the presentation, could you just back up and start, let's go through the results beginning on the first slide, just so everybody can see those. And we will share these results. We'll package these up so that they'll be available online for everybody as well. And we do want to keep in mind that these are the results of the people who are here who've participated. So we are seeing that on the coastal issue, bluff erosion seems to be one of the more common experiences. On the next slide, related to wildfire, quite a few effects there to everyone. So it's wildfires and debris flows have had multiple effects to most of you participating in the meeting, with ash and limitations in activities outside, effects to health, and disruptions in your schedules for sure. On the next slide for extreme heat, what we are seeing in your results and what we have also heard is that many people are having to go out and get air conditioning of some type in their homes. Many of us on the Central Coast never had to have that before. And also seeing changes in our utility bills and disruption to our day-to-day activities. From drought, similarly, folks have experienced an increase in utility bills and loss and reduced use of loss and reduced use of water, which would be associated with the drought. On the human health responses, there seems to be this shared experience of having, again, disruptions to your day-to-day schedule and your routine, changes to your physical and mental health, and delayed, canceled events. I think we've all experienced that this year. And then finally, I think just to revisit this open-ended slide, what we're seeing here from you all is that the fires, Thomas Fire and other fires, and the debris flow are certainly the most memorable. So we do want you to keep that in mind. I think this is like a warm up for what we're going to be asking of you when you go into the breakout rooms. And so thanks so much for participating in our survey. This is open. You should be able to go back to it if you wanted to add anything else as we move through the evening. And I think with that, and I don't see any other questions in the chat. So now I will turn it over to Eli Crispy for a presentation on adaptive capacity a bit more.
Thank you, Tammy. I want to go over a key part of making sure that the vulnerability assessment is accurate and really reflects what's happening on the ground in Santa Barbara County.
Oh,
and
Eli,
that is
sorry to interrupt. We might have a little feedback on you. Can I get someone from the project team to let me know if anyone else is experiencing that?
I hear that as well.
Okay, thank you.
Let me see what I can do here. All right, hopefully that will fix the problem.
Still here.
No, I'm afraid my speakers are off. I'm not sure what other options I can do to remove the feedback.
Okay.
Do you have headphones?
All right. Well, we can push through, Eli, if you'd like to keep going, or we can, Jacqueline could jump in. I'll leave it to you.
Keep going, and then please step in and stop me if it starts to get unbearable.
Yeah, if anyone wants to give me their thoughts on the chat, if you have any challenges with Eli's audio, do let me know.
Hey, Tammy, I see several suggestions in the chat, suggesting to change the microphone input on your Zoom settings, or select, just play with your mute function as well.
Yeah, this is someone who's on Zoom with Eli throughout the day, most days, this isn't unusual. As we all know, these things happen. So, all right.
Sure.
Eli, you can also call in if you would like to use your phone and call in, and we can hear your voice that way, if that works.
I can certainly give that a try.
While Eli is sorting out, we are also going to see if we have some other options. So what we wanted to do with these first slides here now is to spend, Jacqueline kind of started talking about adaptive capacity. And this is one of the important steps we take when we're assessing vulnerability to climate hazards. And so we wanted to be able to spend just a couple slides, 5 to 10 minutes going over this. So Eli, it looks like Jacqueline is going to jump in and cover these slides, and we thank you all for sharing your feedback. It's very important for us to know that the buzzing doesn't work for you, and that we have Plan B. So we come with a deep bench on our team, and Jacqueline is able to jump in and take over. So thank you, Jacqueline.
Sure, Tammy. So I'll first go over the definition and goals for adaptive capacity. It's the ability of a population or asset to respond to, recover from, and adapt to climate change hazards using existing tools, resources, funding, and program, with an emphasis on existing. So the home weatherization programs that I mentioned earlier, or the evacuation assistance programs would all be existing programs that would increase adaptive capacity. So the goal of assessing adaptive capacity and getting your feedback in our discussion groups is to ensure that the assessment covers the full ability of populations and assets to resist and recover from the impacts and harm given current programs and conditions. So when assessing adaptive capacity, we'll ask a couple of broad questions. These include, are there existing programs, policies, or funding mechanisms to provide assistance or to restore and adapt resources? Are there any barriers to populations that may limit response and recovery? And I presented a couple of those barriers that we've already heard in the community. Are these barriers financial limitations, political challenges, lack of access to technology or other resources, or other barriers? Are there alternative assets that exist in or near the county that community members can use? Are there redundant resources that may be brought online in case of failure or loss of function, such as an alternative evacuation route, an alternative electricity source that can be brought online to make sure that the functions of the assets are maintained? So now I'll go through a couple of examples of adaptive capacity. And here are a list of 3. So these are things that increase adaptive capacity. It could be a tree planting program in more urbanized areas that reduce extreme heat and the urban heat island effect, a capital improvement project to upgrade water and wastewater treatment infrastructure to protect them from sea level rise, an evacuation plan and assistance programs for wildfires, landslides and debris flows, or flooding events. Here are 3 additional adaptive capacity examples. So homeless and housing programs for persons experiencing homelessness or households in poverty to make sure that housing is secure for these populations. Home weatherization and retrofit programs, which I provided a couple examples earlier for low-income households and renters. And lastly, programming to increase social capital of unincorporated county residents for all populations. So connecting different populations in the county to increase that social capital. There are also some factors that decrease adaptive capacity. There could be a lack of funding for a particular resilience program or project. There could be political challenges or lack of access to technology to implement these policies and programs. There also could be a shortage of alternatives to maintain operations in the event of damage or failure. So a single access roadway or electricity lines that don't have redundancy in them. The last thing is an absence of social or assistance programs to help populations in need. And with that, I will turn it over again to Tammy for any project questions.
Thank you, Jacqueline. So we did get one question that I can get started on answering, and then others on the project team are welcome to weigh in. We had a question about whether this focus or this project would include recommendations for mitigation in response to, you know, what we've been talking about. And so I'd like to kind of highlight that there's a lot of pieces here. And so I think it's important for us to kind of lay out what's going to be in what part. So this project, the Climate Change Vulnerability Assessment, is focused on assessing, understanding, presenting the vulnerabilities that resulting from climate change in Santa Barbara County. When we wrap this up, so that'll be ultimately we will present this in a report. And right now we are putting a lot of the spatial data on the map that we've provided you, and we're engaging you in helping us to assess right now the adaptive capacity, one of our last steps before we get to this vulnerability assessment. When this project wraps up, there absolutely will be that next step of identifying what are we going to do about it. And those are going to take the form of adaptation strategies and strategies to mitigate climate change. And you'll see those coming through the Climate Action Plan project, which is launching also now and will run concurrent for a little while. And that's a workshop coming up in March. And then the county staff will update the safety element of the general plan, which is also where they'll put some adaptation policies. So it's a good question. Right now, we're able to spend a little bit more time understanding the vulnerabilities right now. Are there any other questions for us at the moment? Okay. All right. Well, thanks everyone. We're doing well with our time. And we really wanted to make sure we got to this part of the evening with you where we are going to put you into small groups. And you'll be able to have conversations with each other about really, you know, what your experiences have been, reflecting on, you know, what you directly have experienced as the hazards. And what we want to learn more about is what tools and resources have been available to you, or that you know are available to help you prepare for, respond to, recover from these events. And we want to get a sense of if you've used them, how they're working. So this is, you know, generally what we call adaptive capacity. It's it's a technical term from all of us, but it's really getting into, you know, what's available to you, what's in your kind of your safety net, your toolkit that helps you be ready for and respond to these events. So you're going to go into breakout rooms. When Sean starts our breakout rooms, you might get a pop-up screen that says you've been assigned to a breakout room number. And it should be set up that you're going to automatically go there, but you may also have the option to use your mouse and click to go straight there. In each group, you're going to have a member, at least one member of our project team, so a dedicated facilitator who will guide you through the questions. Tonight, we're going to use a tool called Jamboard, which is an online tool that will help you to provide notes for us. You get to all use virtual sticky notes. While you're if you're in your breakout room and you're having any trouble, you are welcome to leave and to come back to the main room. You should have two options at the bottom right of your screen: to leave the group, to leave the small group, the breakout room, or to leave the meeting. If you hit either one of those, if you hit the leave the group, you're going to come back to the main room. You'll see me, you'll see Sean, we can help you out. If you accidentally leave the meeting, you can rejoin us by using the Zoom link that got you here, and we can put you back into a breakout room. So I want to give you a peek at what you're going to see when you're in your breakout rooms. So your facilitator is going to share their screen, and they're also going to give you a link similar to the link we provided you for Mentimeter. a link that you can paste in your browser so that you can participate in the tool as well. So you'll have the option to answer the questions by typing your responses on what we call sticky notes and posting them. If you're comfortable doing that, we absolutely encourage you to do it. If you're not, totally okay. Your facilitator is going to take your notes down as well. And you can also provide notes in the chat. But anyway, you give them to us. We're looking forward to getting them, and we will package them up and provide a summary of all the groups after tonight's workshop. And so I know this is a quick overview. Your facilitator is going to go over, they're going to actually show you how to do it. We wanted to just make sure you had a little preview here before you dropped into the groups. And I think that is my last preview. So I think, Sean, we are ready to go into breakout groups.
Perfect. Looks like I have everyone in a room. I'll open those up. And again, if you have any issues, come back to the main room. We'll help you.
So we will see you in about 20 minutes. Hello, welcome back to the main room. We're slowly seeing folks come in. They're going to close in 5 seconds. So just a minute, we'll have everybody back. All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome back. How were your breakout group discussions? Good. Thank you for having those conversations with us. I know it can be difficult to talk about or revisit some of the experiences that you've had, but we really appreciate that you were able to share with us. So we now are going to go over the highlights of your conversations. We had 6 very small groups. And so I'd like to call on the leads for each group. I'll call on you one at a time and ask you to share, a couple highlights of your discussion. And while we're doing this, Jacqueline is going to share the Jamboards from each group. And so we're going to see if Ricky is able to share the highlights of Group 1's discussion.
We actually had someone from our group who was willing to be your spokesperson.
Okay.
Anna, she speaks both English and Spanish, so she could go ahead and give a couple highlights.
Okay.
Number 1, we talked about it among our group. And for everyone, hi, my name is Ana Rico. As I mentioned in our group, we talked about for this kind of meetings to be more accessible, a lot more easier for us to join the meetings. When me and one of the person in my group tried to join and register, it made it very difficult to join and to register. So if you guys can make it a little bit more accessible, have more food distribution. COVID has helped a lot of families right now, but once COVID is done, eventually those programs are going to be done. We would like for those programs to stay working still and still allow families to receive those meals, that sort of boxes of food that they give out. Also, if they could have more programs for adults, and this means like us families, Hispanic families, basically. Thank you.
Thank you, Ana. Gracias.
Yes, thank you, Ana and Ricky. We'll switch now to Group 2, Eli or Garrett.
My audio okay?
Yeah, you're back to normal, Eli.
All right. Yeah, we had a very good discussion. There were a lot of people in our group who had been in the county for a while, so many of us had a lot of experience, and particularly with wildfires. People pointed out that they had often had to evacuate multiple times. Sometimes there was good information about where to go. Sometimes there was not. It sounds like that's generally improved over time. There was also been, many people have experienced conflicting information around the PSPS events and what areas would be shut off from power and when those shutoffs might occur. So that was an opportunity for improvement. And as far as some of the resources that were available, again, pointing out a lot of the different services that are out there, a lot of the different maps and alert systems, people have all found that very helpful. That was really the focus of our discussions.
Thank you, Eli. Jacqueline? Ooh,
Yeah,
look at all that color.
We tried to group the different topics or different hazards by colors. We had really great discussions. One of my group members shared her experience with the loss of home to a fire almost 30 years ago and the programs available then. As far as responding to extreme heat, there may be appliance stores that don't have enough resources for all families, or elderly relatives that may have difficulty preparing for these heat events or responding to them. There was also a group member that noticed that losing power and internet, it shuts everything down, and it's difficult to be able to work. And on top of having a pandemic, not being able to go to other locations to work as well. As far as the resources available, one group member said mentioned the Aware and Prepare program that has helped build the Emergency Operations Center, done the CERT trainings, and build communication tools in the county. And as well as the emergency notification system, Nixle has been great. There have been a couple errors, but overall great for helping people evacuate from fires.
Great, thanks, Jacqueline, and to your group. Julie and Jessica.
Yeah, sure. So on our first question, group members brought up a wide variety of issues that they experienced with regards to preparing and responding to different hazards. Something that was touched upon a couple of times was the effect that wildfire smoke has had on health and other daily life activities like attending educational programs. We also touched upon how COVID has kind of intersected with other climate hazards in kind of interesting ways, both kind of overshadowing potential climate hazards in our mind, and also in some ways helping people become more resilient because now they have masks on hand. They're used to wearing masks because of dealing with wildfire smoke. For our second question, something that was brought up a couple of times was the importance of kind of informal friendship networks and helping to acquire resources and share resources and finding places to evacuate to in the event that evacuation is required. We also discussed different training programs offered by different organizations throughout the county that help with like mental health aspects of climate change preparation and emergency alerts in the county and small kind of home retrofits like fireman sandbags.
Thanks, Jessica. Does that cover it? Okay.
Yeah.
All right, David.
Hey, yeah, like the other groups, we had a really good engagement on the different questions, and also had perspectives both from members of the community in Santa Barbara County, but also from Los Angeles County. So that was very good. For the first question, in terms of what your experience, either preparing, responding, or recovering, a lot of commonalities in terms of like poor air quality days and disruptions to both work and outdoor activities, either from poor air quality warnings, also closures in terms of some facilities, impacts to transportation and infrastructure network, as experienced from flooding events and debris flow. Also had comments, how that related to essential workers and the impacts, particularly for the large numbers of our workers that commute into the county from either Ventura or San Luis Obispo County. I think the experience they hosted essential workers who can't travel to and from their homes that are outside the county. And a lot of efforts in terms of helping with volunteer efforts to distribute water, meals, N95 masks. So a lot of really quality comments and also talking about kind of dipping into some of the needs, but wanted to highlight it in terms of the need to plan for financial assistance, particularly for vulnerable communities or underserved communities who may not have access to mainstream financial aid following either loss of employment due to some of these events. Yeah, next question or next slide. So this was looking at what resources and programs and tools are available or that they were aware of. Talking about sort of the emergency preparedness and alert system and both working well and also identifying the need to ensure that it has a broad reach and is accessible to all communities, particularly communities where English is second language. Identified and talked about the effects of extreme heat days in terms of both the existing built environment. Many of the structures and residences within the county do not have air conditioning, and changes experienced in heat days, and also identified the need to both identify and improve and expand resiliency hubs and cooling centers for the community. Discussion of impacts or have at least in certain communities, both within the state and certainly in Santa Barbara, landowners experiencing increased insurance premiums and in some cases even loss of coverage due to wildfire events or being located within extremely high fire hazard areas. Talk about undocumented, talked about translators, interpreters have been superstar communication pros. Certainly in terms of the value of the translators and interpreters. And we're seeing that both with COVID and saw it in Thomas Fire and debris flow events and the value in terms of engaging and informing the community. So yeah, a lot of very good, well thought, commonly experienced community responses to some of these hazards and the tools and organizations that are available to address those. So yeah, great conversation.
Yeah, thanks, David, and to your group. And we can get a report back from our last group and then we'll wrap up after that. So Karina?
So very quickly, so my group shared some experiences related to power shutoffs, and kind of they talked about the different ways that they were alerted of these power shutoffs, whether that was via mail, whether it was via text message or an email. We also discussed the hazards of air quality from wildfire and how Red Cross was an organization where they could go and shelter at during those events at UCSB, and also how Red Cross was an organization that they could go to in order to get help. And some community members volunteered with Red Cross. Next question. So again, some of the resources, of course, were Red Cross. That was very helpful. A community member shared that. The Santa Barbara Association of Realtors provided grants for those that were affected by these events. And again, we also kind of discussed the various ways that people are alerted of the disasters. And for example, one member doesn't watch very much TV. So the way that she would find out about these hazards or about something was with the reverse 911 with text messages. So yeah, it's a great conversation that we had.
Thanks, Karina. And thank you, everyone. Thank you again for joining us and for sharing in your small breakout groups. I think we have 2 more slides to show you just with some information if you'd like to stay. Well, and we hope you will stay engaged with us as we go through the process. So as I mentioned, this climate change vulnerability assessment project will move forward. We're going to prepare a summary report. We're going to score vulnerability, identify vulnerable assets, people, places, and services, and then prepare a report that will be available this summer. Generally, we're saying that, but meanwhile, the Climate Action Plan has launched, and there is a workshop for the Climate Action Plan later in March. There'll be 2 options, a 12 o'clock and a 6 o'clock workshop. And there's a lot of opportunity right now to talk about climate action, to talk about what we can do at the city of Santa Barbara, in the county, in our neighborhoods. So the city of Santa Barbara is hosting some brainstorming sessions for their climate action plan in early March. And the Community Environmental Council is hosting a climate action webinar series in March as well. And they're gonna wrap this spring with a Earth Day celebration. Let's not forget about Earth Day in April. So there are a number of opportunities for you to continue to talk about climate hazards, climate action in Santa Barbara County, whether these events are hosted by the County of Santa Barbara, the City of Santa Barbara, and the Community Environmental Council. So I think we're very fortunate to have these partnerships and opportunities to come together. There will be a few different products that come out of them, but through this One Climate Initiative, our intent is to ensure that these products work together, that we're collaborative and consistent, and are able to have this momentum to move forward together. So I think that wraps us up. Again, if you have any last minute questions, drop those into the chat. We encourage you to stay engaged with the project by going to the project website. If you did not find out about this meeting through the sustainability newsletter, please do go to the county's website and sign up for that. And I think we've also asked you about that in the registration. We will provide a recording of this meeting on the project website along with a meeting summary. And we will have the materials available in Spanish and English. So if you know someone who wasn't able to join us tonight, but would like to kind of understand what we shared, let them know the recording's coming, and you'll find out about that through the county's email blast. So thank you again. That's it for us tonight. I hope you all stay well and take care. Good night.